With every single FPL manager having 5 free transfers to spend in game week 16, we got to use at least one, otherwise we lose them. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing the best transfers going into game week 16, discussing some Mateta replacements and some cheap differentials for your midfielders. So as always, if you're looking forward to today's video, make sure to drop a like and of course, hit that subscribe button. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So going into game week 16, Mateta is one of the most sold players, and I think that is rightly so. Just to cover off Mateta as a pick right now, especially if you own him in the game or have just sold him, just for a little bit of justification. Crystal Palace are in a position right now where they, of course, still have a lot of European football. They're playing this midweek, they're playing the following midweek, and they also have EFL Cup quarter-final action against Arsenal. So we are anticipating Glasner to basically play a full-strength Crystal Palace team, not in this week's European football, but next week's and the following midweek. So Palace's fixtures are not ideal, and Mateta is coming off very, very early. I think you can keep him because I think Palace are a great team, but all in all, I do think selling him is the right move. And I think the pool of players that we can select from aren't that big. Hence why we have got some rogue differentials as options here, and I want to discuss them. So first, let's talk about the main guy, and that is going to be Thiago. Going into game week 16, one of the most bought players. Obviously blanked the last 2 game weeks, was benched in game week 14, but that was more of a rest as opposed to him playing bad, because he then played 90 minutes against Spurs in game week 15. Missed a couple of chances, but to be honest with you, Spurs were just the better team in that game. So I think first we need to remind ourselves, if we're investing in Thiago, Brentford aren't this top team in the league. I still expect them to not rip up trees against the big teams. However, what they have in front of them is a decent run of fixtures. Leeds, Wolves, Bournemouth at home, Spurs at home, Everton, Sunderland. So long-term, the fixtures are really solid for Thiago. Now, when we look at his numbers per 90 minutes, his expected goal involvement is 0.83, which is fantastic per 90 minutes. However, he's abnormally had a lot of penalties over this period, and really his expected goal involvement almost halves when we take out the penalties. So I still think he's a great pick. His minutes are fantastic. He's the talisman in this Brentford team. Brentford doing a very similar thing where when they do score goals, it funnels through their main guy, and right now their main guy is Thiago, and that will continue with no other alternatives available. And I just think the fact that they have Leeds and then Wolves in the next 2, the fixtures are too good to ignore, and I totally understand why people are going there, in particular with Brentford obviously having no European football. But just remember, Thiago's numbers have been very inflated with those abnormal amount of penalties. Now, the other 2 options outside of Thiago just naturally are going to be a bit differential picks, because Thiago is just the mainstream option. Jarrod Bowen's one that is definitely catching my eye. Now, West Ham still are not fantastic under Nuno, but I think we're starting to see some signs of life in this West Ham team. I think it in particular helps with the return of Somerville and also Paqueta off the back of that ban. Now, with West Ham's fixtures coming up, they are nowhere near as good as Brentford's. Villa at home, City away in the next 2. So I absolutely get the argument of just avoiding Bowen in general, but if we were to cast a bit more of a longer term lens, from game week 18 onwards, Fulham, Brighton, Wolves and then Nottingham Forest. Same applies for Bowen in West Ham, where there's no European football. And I probably would argue, even though Bowen's numbers are not as good as Thiago's at 0.23, if we do continue to see improvements of West Ham as what we've seen over the last few weeks, I wouldn't be surprised to see, of all of the options on our screens right now, his to get the biggest hike up in terms of his involvement in this West Ham team. Because unless things are changing, and maybe they are, Bowen, whoever's been the manager, has been the talisman in that team. And I think going into this week, it is a bit of a rogue move. I would pick Thiago over Bowen, in particular with Thiago being cheaper, but I want people just to have Bowen on their radar for future game weeks, because he could be a great differential. Finally, the other one's going to be Ekitike. Now, I am recording this just off the back of the Champions League game for Liverpool. So we are in a position right now where Ekitike's minutes are massively going to be at risk. He played the full game in that fixture away against Inter Milan. Isak come off after 65 minutes. However, from what I've seen, Isak just hasn't been performing for Liverpool. And the fact they come off after 65 minutes, one would argue, well, that means he starts in the Premier League. And his fixture against Brighton, I'm going to say, is not a given at all. Brighton are one of those teams, as we know, step up in the big games. And I do think there is just way more trust in Ekitike for Arne Slot than that of Isak. But of course, the price tag of Isak is the thing that is obviously keeping him selected each and every week when he isn't injured. So I think Ekitike is a real punt on the minutes perspective, and 0.37 expected goal involvement per 90 when he's 8.4 million, not ideal. It's also worth noting for anyone who's got any hopes of Ekitike being a penalty taker, those were squashed last night with Szoboszlai taking the penalty while both McAllister and Ekitike were on the field. Isak wasn't on the field, just to note. With the fixtures coming up for Liverpool, Brighton, then Spurs, they're just not as good as Thiago's once again. And I think the minutes for Ekitike are very difficult to judge. I do think no Salah probably improves Ekitike. I think we are starting to see a 4-4-2 from Arne Slot. And funny enough, I think Salah with Ekitike as a front two is the best combination. But I think we might land in a world where Ekitike and Isak do play with one another. So maybe Ekitike's minutes will just be good naturally because there is no Mo Salah in the team. And I do think it is a good punt if you want it from now until game week 19. But it does take a brave FPL manager to assume that Ekitike is going to start both of those games when you have someone like Thiago. So to conclude, very long-winded, unfortunately I do think Thiago is the go-to pick from Mateta, and I do think selling Mateta is the right move. However, would I be surprised if Bowen or Ekitike outscored Thiago? Absolutely not. With Thiago being quite dependent on penalties, but Leeds and Wolves are as good as they get. So I think rightly so, Thiago is the guy you go for. So moving into some midfielders right now, and we are just focusing on Man United. I apologise for anybody who's a City fan, a Liverpool fan, a Chelsea fan, a Spurs fan, because most people dislike Man United apart from Man United fans. But they are absolutely on radar for game week 16 and beyond. In particular, Bruno Fernandes. Now, I've been getting roasted in the comments section for the whole season for being a Bruno day one owner. But I spoke about it. This guy is one of the best picks in the game. The reason being is, we know he's an absolute monster for defensive contributions. He hits them not on a regular basis in terms of every game, but I would say, honestly, 2 of every 3 games, he's hitting defensive contributions. It's just because he plays in that double pivot. He is expected to do so much work in that, and it naturally means when he plays the full 90 minutes, which he does every game, he racks up those points. And if we add alongside that, penalties, which we know he's got, open play expected goal involvement, which we know he has, all set pieces, he's just a monster in the game. So the reason why I put Bruno as essential is I honestly think he is. Looking at the fixtures coming up, Bournemouth, Villa, Newcastle, Wolves, Leeds, Burnley. I think if you don't own Bruno Fernandes, this needs to be the priority buy in your teams. No European football for Man United. Yes, I know Bruno Fernandes isn't in a front 3, but I honestly think this guy is the definition of a December player. Plays every single minute. You know exactly what you're getting from him. I think he's the best midfielder in the game right now, especially for the next 6 game weeks. And the numbers don't lie. Now, the reason why we got both Cunha and Mbeumo on here is because they are completely relevant players. First, it's going to be Brian Mbeumo. Do not be buying him. Game week 16 is a good fixture against Bournemouth. I think he's actually perfect for that type of game that Bournemouth don't like. And I think we saw the best of Brian Mbeumo against Wolves, but to be honest with you, anybody is good against Wolves right now. Don't buy Mbeumo because, as we know, he's expected to leave for the Africa Cup of Nations after game week 16. So you possibly are missing 17 to 21. So don't buy Mbeumo. But if you own Brian Mbeumo, I think there is a case to keep. The numbers are good, 0.55 expected goal involvement. He won't be on penalties. Anybody that thought Bruno wasn't going to be on penalties after his recent misses was squashed after taking one in game week 16. But I think it's an interesting conundrum. If you own Mbeumo right now, I'd be very tempted to roll the dice once again, keep him for this game week if you can't get to Bruno, obviously in different avenues, and then sell him to Bruno in game week 17. Don't get me wrong, over the next 6, Bruno is the guy to own. But I almost think Mbeumo, while you own him, I'd keep for this game week and then sell him to Bruno alongside the cash that you need to do it. In terms of Cunha, really interesting because, of course, are we tempted by a double Man United? Now, played as a forward against Wolves, 1.16 expected goal involvement against them. Again, I would take that over a pinch of salt because Wolves aren't that bad. If anybody hasn't watched them, they're crap. And I think there is an interesting case for Cunha. However, I just want to see what happens with Man United once they don't have Ahmad, once they don't have Mbeumo. I want to see whether Cunha steps up to the plate and becomes the talisman in that front 3. I think it's a bit too early for me to jump on Cunha. I think if you don't own Cunha and you just own Bruno, perfect. Keep Bruno, avoid Mbeumo, monitor Cunha. If he delivers in both the Bournemouth and Villa game, I think from game week 18 onwards, there is a case to buy Cunha at that price point alongside Bruno. But it isn't a case of buying Cunha to cover Bruno. Bruno is still the number one guy. Keep Mbeumo for 1 week and then sell him and monitor Cunha. Now, finally, on the subject of midfielders, I think there is actually quite an interesting pool of cheap enabling midfielders that are starting to emerge in the game. And 3 of those right now who are being quite popular going into game week 16 is going to be Everton's Dewsbury Hall off the back of that fantastic double-digit haul in game week 15. Wilson at Fulham, who of course has now had back-to-back games of big scores. Congrats to anybody who went there early doors. And then we got Elliot Anderson, who has been a popular pick from day one, really. 5.4 million, still really cheap. We're not talking about players here that are going to be your 4th midfielder. These guys are probably going to be your 5th midfielder. They are that cheap. And going into game week 16, a period, of course, where we're going to see lots of fixtures and we want to buy players who have guaranteed minutes. I think these 3 at their price points actually offer exactly that. I think these guys are good for minutes. So first let's take Dewsbury Hall because he is being bought by a lot of people going into game week 16 and I understand it. When we look at the numbers right now, 0.32 expected goal involvement per 90 minutes is really solid. And he's kind of a bit of both, like XG is 0.11 and expected assists is 0.2. So I think all in all, he's just a really well-rounded player. And in terms of actually Everton's fixtures coming up, this is where I have a slight issue. Chelsea away followed by Arsenal in the next 2 are not the best entry points. But then after that, we have got Burnley, Forest, Brentford and Wolves. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. As a Chelsea fan, we're in a bad place right now. No Caicedo once again for the Everton game. Losing against Atlanta. Chelsea always have these spells where we really underperform. And I think right now we are seeing fatigue in the Chelsea ranks. Another injury to Wesley Fofana. So even though the Chelsea game is not an ideal fixture to buy Dewsbury Hall, if you're in a position where you're looking to downgrade and then free up some funds to maybe invest in a more expensive player, I honestly wouldn't be stressed about this Chelsea game. I really do think Chelsea are there to be got at in this particular game. Now, I want to note, in terms of Dewsbury Hall, that he has hit DEFCON in 3 matches. He isn't the guy who's averaging 12 per 90. Apologies, I'm still a little bit ill. 12 per 90, but he has hit it in 3 games. So he is an industrious midfielder, and I think he has lots of different avenues to points. What we need to note about Dewsbury Hall, and I've noted it here about the Africa Cup of Nations impact, Ndai will be going to the Africa Cup of Nations. So does that actually put even more emphasis on Dewsbury Hall being a goal scorer or a creative threat in this team? And I think that is going to be the case. I think we're going to see an even more attacking version of Dewsbury Hall over this period. But I think you can wait for the next 2 fixtures before investing as him unless he's an enabling pick. Now, in terms of Harry Wilson, it's 5.3 million. Somebody who's kind of more come onto the radar over the last few game weeks. If we look at his numbers, 0.24 expected goal involvement per 90. It's solid, but it's not groundbreaking, really. And what we need to note is that he is not hitting defensive contributions. So he basically is set pieces, open play threat, and that kind of is it. But when we look at his fixtures coming up, Burnley, Forest, West Ham, Palace, Liverpool, Chelsea, I think they're okay. I know Wilson's been in really good form over the last few weeks, but I don't have it in me right now to say to you, I think this is the guy that you need to own in your teams. Now, again, 5.3 million, really good enabler. And AFCON will impact Wilson with Iwobi going to there. I think one other as well, Chukwueze, whatever his pronunciation is. I do apologise. I think also another one that is going. But I think that could actually negatively impact Fulham to an extent because they're quite influential players right now. And I don't know whether the depth for Fulham is going to be able to cope with that scenario. And the same could possibly be said about Ndai at Everton. I think Wilson's good, but I do prefer Dewsbury Hall because I think there's more avenues to points and better fixtures over a longer term period. And then it comes down to Elliot Anderson. He is top right now in terms of defensive contributions in literally the game. 13.27 defensive contributions per 90. And when he doesn't hit it in a game, he literally hits 11. So this guy is an absolute monster for that. But in terms of the numbers, 0.27 expected goal involvement. The fixtures, I would say, are quite mixed. I think they're quite kind that they're second on the list here. Spurs, Fulham away. City difficult. Everton, Villa away. West Ham away, not ideal. And I also would say, of course, European football for Forest. It's not huge over this period. Obviously, we got it this week, and then they play Spurs. I think Elliot Anderson is probably the more boring pick. The other two have a bit more to their game, I would suggest. So I think all in all, if I was investing right now going into game week 16, I think the temptation would be for a short-term punt on Wilson. I do agree on that. I think Burnley, Forest, and then West Ham is a nice spell. I think that's better than Dewsbury Hall. I think that's better than Anderson. But then I think from game week 19, if you wanted to and you had loads of transfers, I think a lot of people will be sat there with lots of transfers at this point. Then maybe flipping it and then going to Elliot Anderson over that period. So Harry Wilson, absolutely a differential pick for your teams. I quite like what I'm seeing. I think he will continue to get good game time. But do I think Dewsbury Hall is better than him over the next three? Probably not. I think Wilson is worth the punt in your FPL teams. And let me know in the comment section, which one of these three are you tempted by, or do you already own one of them? Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's video. Looking at some of the top transfers going into game week 16. Hopefully I've covered off some of the key players. I appreciate I haven't covered Foden, but I think he kind of speaks for himself right now. And Szoboszlai, as I said, took a penalty in last night's game. I need to do a bit more detail on that one, but it looks like he could be a great pick as well. Maybe not for the next 2 weeks, so for those that are wondering. I think the fixtures are tough enough for Liverpool. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, please do consider dropping a like and, of course, hitting that subscribe button. Any questions, put them in the comment section. I'll be sure to get to them. And I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Take care. Cheers.